So our topic today is stop pushing a coaching culture. And our focus today is really going to be on sharing two critical ideas that can help you lay the right kind of foundation for a coaching culture. And actually, we think can actually create some pull for coaching in your organization. So quick reminder, if you haven't already done so or you're just joining, we'd like to invite you to take our organization readiness questionnaire. And you can type the link that you see there on the screen in a separate browser window or a mobile device. And please be aware that it is case sensitive, so you need to make sure it's all lowercase. And we've also posted that link in the chat. So if you want to go to chat, that's hyperlinked. You can just click it and it will take you right to the survey. So this organization readiness questionnaire is designed to kind of give you a general sense of how primed or how ready your organization may be for a coaching culture. And it's established on 12 key factors that we found were very positively correlated with groups that demonstrated kind of an elite level of effectiveness at coaching and developing others. And so if you've attended our webinars in the past, you know that when we offer these kind of assessments, we typically have you take it and then we deliver a report to you to your email a little bit later in the webinar, after it's kind of been completed. The neat thing about today's questionnaire is that the results are both shared with you live in the survey and also sent to your email. So you'll be able to see your score right as you take the survey. And the other neat thing is that for those of you that are going to be listening to this webinar as a recording in the future, this link is still going to be active. So if you're listening to this as a recording, you can go to this link and you'll be able to participate in the questionnaire. So thank you for doing this, and we will reference this and the results a little bit later in the webinar. One other logistical item, we love your interaction and input as a part of kind of this overall webinar experience. So we want to invite you to join our live polling. And you can do this a couple of ways. We've got the URL that you can use, pollev.com/zfpoll. And again, you can open a separate browser window. You can go there on your smartphone or your tablet and type in that URL. Or you can just simply text, and you can text the keyword ZFpoll, and you text that to the number 22333. And if you are joining by text, if you text that in, you're going to receive a confirmation text back. Once you've joined, you don't need to do anything else. If you're texting, you can just continue to text your answers. And if you join by the URL, you'll see the polls kind of pop up automatically as we move through the presentation today. So we're going to do a quick practice poll just to make sure everyone knows how this works, and then you'll get the opportunity to participate in these live polls throughout the webinar. And I know many of you watch these webinars or participate as groups, as colleagues. And so if you have a colleague that joins late, we're always going to have how to join at the bottom left of the screen there. So people can join, even if they walk in late, we'd encourage you to invite them to join. But if you have joined, all you have to do is join one time. So our first practice poll that we're going to use today is, which of these cheeses do you prefer? So we have the top of the list there is cheddar cheese. And then moving downward, we have mozzarella cheese, brie cheese, and Gouda cheese. So we're seeing some responses come in. Jack, what kind of cheese do you prefer? Are you a cheese connoisseur?
I do like cheeses, and the one I would prefer is the bottom one. And my friend who had spent some time in Holland said the right pronunciation is Gouda, or something like that. Well, I can't quite imitate that, but anyway, that's my favorite.
All right, and so thank you to everybody. So now that you know that how this works, let's move on to a little bit less food-oriented questions. Always dangerous around lunch. So we're gonna move on from that. So this question is a text wall, so you can respond with a full statement, and you're going to see people's responses scroll on the screen. And so what we want to know is, why does your organization want more coaching? So thank you. We see some responses coming in, things like increase engagement, to help improve employees and leaders.
I see one there that says improving productivity and meeting customer needs. developing our in-house talent. Those are all excellent reasons. Well, thank you for that. And let's kind of move on and let's talk a little bit about when coaching conversations are at their best, lots of good things happen. We have found from our research that coaching behavior is the most correlated leadership behavior with improving or increasing employee engagement. A second outcome is that 3 times as many team members, when asked a question about, are you willing to go the extra mile, 3 times more say that they are, when they also kind of indicate that they are receiving periodic coaching from their manager. A third outcome that we see is that when asked about their intention to leave the organization, if they're considering going somewhere else to work, that there's a 40% decrease in employees' intentions to leave the organization when their manager provides them with periodic coaching. Now, we know that there's a gap between what we want and what we sometimes realize. The first slide on the left-hand side is a picture of a cupcake that a person, those of you who are cooks and like to prepare kind of attractive, colorful desserts for the family. The picture on the left is what you hope to have achieved. If you were looking in your Pinterest collection there, this is what you would expect to see. But the reality when it comes out is not exactly like that. So the picture on the right says, now this is what really turns out. That same phenomenon applies to coaching. There's been some pretty good research done that indicates that when coaching goes awry, that it has a negative effect. Employee engagement scores drop to 20%, 20 points below average. Team scores are 15 points below average in terms of their perceptions of whether or not they are receiving fair treatment. So we want to be very clear up front that though we're going to advocate more coaching, better coaching, we also realize that when done badly, it can have some negative effects. So my first point that we want to make in this webinar today is around your perceptions of, are managers generally good at coaching? One of the things we found from some research that we've done ourselves is that about 1/4 of leaders drastically overrate their own coaching skills. As rated by their colleagues, these leaders who rated themselves in the top quartile were actually at the bottom third in terms of their overall effectiveness. So they thought they were great. People that they worked for didn't think they were so hot. A second kind of force or in kind of situation having to do with coaching is the perceptions on the part of managers and their employees, different perceptions about how frequently coaching is occurring. When you talk to the managers, to hear them talk, they would often say things like, yeah, well, I'm constantly providing coaching to my subordinates. It's really frequent. And then when you talk to the employees, they say, oh no, I almost never does my boss provide me with any coaching. And you wonder what is it that causes that disconnect? And we won't take time right here to try to tease out that answer, but my hunch is that conversation that the manager had with the subordinate, the manager thought that this was a productive, useful conversation, that it had a point to it, and the employee often perceives it as being just a casual conversation, having a drink in the cafeteria, and that their perceptions of what constitutes coaching is often very different. So we'd like to kind of get your views now for a moment about how are your managers in terms of their current coaching skills. And in this case, we're going to invite you to use an old-fashioned letter grade system where we're going to ask you to give your collective group of managers in your organization an A if they're providing extraordinary coaching that's making a significant difference, and B if they're providing good coaching that's having some impact, or a C, average, maybe a little bit helpful. D and F, we're kind of getting failing grades. We're doing a little bit more harm than good because it's done poorly. And then, of course, the option of, well, they just don't do it. It's an incomplete. So please weigh in, if you would, in terms of how your managers are currently executing their coaching practices. Well, it looks like the great majority of you are saying, well, it's kind of average, and a few people saying good. Almost no one's saying that it's extraordinary. Lots of incompletes, and a number of you saying it almost detracts in terms of its current state.
So we got some work to do.
We have work to do.
A common approach that I think we're referencing here is that organizations really kind of hope to improve results by expecting more conversations, more feedback, more coaching, and that in and of itself is going to make a difference. And our point of view really is that this push for a coaching culture has some risk to it, and it does have potential to cause some damage. Because do you really know how effective your managers are at coaching? Do you really know the quality of those conversations? And then referencing what Jack said, it's do you even know how they define coaching? Do they even really, or is everyone on the same page about what a coaching conversation is? So this is an important question. Does your current coaching culture, or what you think of it, does it rest on a crumbling foundation? And I'm stealing this analogy from Jack's book, The Extraordinary Coach, where he talks about the Leaning Tower of Pisa was kind of intended to be this really ornate, wonderful bell tower. It's composed of marble. It has multiple stories and winding staircases and all these pillars, and it weighs a lot. But for all of the work that went into kind of creating this structure above ground, it was built only on a foundation that only goes 3 meters deep. And the soil around it was very soft and unsettled. And so guess what happens? That they build it and the tower starts to lean. And I think one of the funniest parts of this story is that as it started to lean, when they started to build stories on top, they started to just build those stories to kind of be heavier on one side. So they actually do not best practice construction to try to pull the tower back the other way instead of going back and focusing on the foundation. And at one point, it's described that in fact, it wasn't just leaning, it was just slowly falling like 2 or 3 millimeters per year. And so sometimes I think with all the best intentions in mind, we seek to kind of build coaching cultures in this same way. We got this grand edifice, we have this grand vision, we have beautiful complexity that we want to try to implement in our organization. But we fail to invest enough in the foundation, and we kind of fail to realize that maybe that slight lean that we're seeing is actually an indication that, in fact, this is falling over, even if it's just falling over slowly. So this is kind of where your organization readiness results come in. Give you an opportunity to kind of take a view at your foundation, your current foundation. So if you joined late and you have no idea what I'm talking about, we've created an organization readiness survey. The link is there at the bottom of the screen. So I'd invite you to still go ahead and take that. And so you can type that in your browser, or again, we have a hyperlink chat or a hyperlink in the chat window that you can just click on. So the results that you received suggest a certain readiness that your organization may have for a coaching culture. So if you have a high readiness score, then the people in your organization, kind of the culture that you already has, is already good at practicing some of these key behaviors that can make infusing feedback and coaching into that culture successful. And if your readiness score is average or low, then you may want to consider implementing some of these ideas that we're talking about to lay a strong foundation so that you can have a successful coaching culture. So we'd like to get a sense from the group about how ready your organizations are kind of across the board. So in this poll, we'd like to ask you to select the corresponding choice with the results that you received from your report. So did you get a high readiness score, kind of an average readiness, or low readiness? And let's just see how we all stack up. All right, so thank you for doing this. And looks like we have some organizations that could use some foundation building. So you are all in the right webinar today.
What we're going to advocate to you is not that you don't help your organization create a coaching culture, but it's the method by which you get there. It's the foundation on which it rests. So let me observe that I think that the foundation that we've been assuming, the foundation that we've been relying on, is a foundation that's basically based on push. That is, we are expecting the managers to initiate coaching conversations with their subordinates. We're expecting that coaching is going to flow downhill in almost the identical way that water flows downhill. And we're going to advocate to you that introducing a culture that would have coaching be requested and asked for is a much more likely way to bring about this culture of coaching than one that relies on push. Pull is going to be far more successful. And by pull, we mean that managers themselves are encouraged to ask for feedback from their subordinates. And in turn, subordinates are encouraged to ask for feedback from their managers and each other. We believe that there's very strong data to suggest that when that happens, that the frequency and the effectiveness of coaching will go dramatically upward. So what would be, in your opinion, the effect on the organization and on its culture if you were to kind of shift from a push strategy to a pull strategy? And here we're going to invite you to be creative and either put in words, or if you are a fan of emojis, let us know kind of what you think the impact would be. And thank you very much. We're seeing some very clever and very creative smiles and thumbs up, and a variety of creative expressions about that. Our sense is that if you could increase this pull dimension, that it sends a series of very powerful signals. For one, it says to the individual, both to the employee and the managers, you can influence the outcome. You're in a position to have a stronger amount of control over what this conversation is going to be. And it shifts it from kind of being a top-down, authority-driven process to a kind of upward kind of a process. It has a much more egalitarian feel to it, with people being treated as equals, where we both can learn from the conversation. When the manager asks his or her subordinates for their ideas, for their positions, for their creativity, you clearly are treating them with a great deal of respect. You are communicating that you are a valued person and your opinion is respected. And we just think that sends a really positive message. From the manager's perspective, it's a way of verifying that what he or she is doing is really perceived by the people around him as having value. And so there are just a series of very powerful kind of signals that this conveys. Let me tell you about some interesting research that we did. So it happens that we have a coaching 360-degree feedback instrument. And one of the items on that instrument was an item that specifically asked the respondents to assess the degree to which their manager requested feedback from them, the degree to which he or she asked for feedback. What we did was we took those those managers from a data set of about 1,700 leaders. We took those that were in the top quartile and compared them to people who were in the bottom quartile. And as we looked at what was different about those in the top quartile versus those who were in the bottom quartile, we saw that a number of other things went hand in hand with asking for feedback. What we learned was that, first of all, it affected the way that the manager, gave feedback. It affected the way that they gave it in a way that people would accept their feedback. It increased the frequency of interactions. They initiated more interactions with their subordinates. It created a very open and trusting work environment. And what was also really encouraging was that as it pertained to the manager himself, we found that they received feedback with much less defensiveness, and that they were far more prone to change and to act on the feedback that they received when they had asked for it. So it just had some very powerful consequences. So, correlations, we're well aware that correlation doesn't prove causation. But it was fascinating to see that the one fairly specific behavior that was different between these people in the top quartile and the bottom quartile, that asking for feedback appeared to be the driving force behind all these other consequences.
And we're even just showing a few highlights from that list.
There's a long list. There's a very long list. Yep.
One of the other elements that we looked at regarding engagement is how asking for feedback would impact that engagement of direct reports. And you see here when a manager was in the bottom quartile for asking. So, maybe they weren't consistent, maybe they rarely asked. Their team's engagement came in at the 38th percentile, so 12 points below our global average. Where in comparison, managers that were in the top quartile for asking, right? So now you imagine managers that are frequently asking for feedback, and that's something that they do as a matter of habit. Their team's engagement score came in at the 65th percentile, so 15 points above the global average. So this is a really important point because we believe that there is this kind of very powerful aspect to asking for feedback. And, if you consider the risk factors, I also would think that there's a lot less risk in driving engagement by encouraging people to ask for feedback versus encouraging people to just give more coaching, because the quality of coaching sometimes can be subject, where asking for feedback is going to drive engagement probably a little bit more easily. It's a little bit more foundational. So this is an important mindset shift from an organization perspective. I'm sure you all remember and love the movie The Karate Kid. And if you haven't, I'm going to give you a little refresher. Daniel, high school kid, teenager, Daniel was trying to learn karate from a book. And Mr. Miyagi, he sees this, thinks that's a really kind of terrible idea and offers to teach Daniel karate. Daniel's pretty excited about that. But what does Daniel end up doing? He's waxing cars, he's sanding the floor, he's painting the fence. And, he's thinking this isn't karate, this is free labor. And then it's not till a little bit later in the movie that Daniel learns that this whole time what he's really been doing is mastering the fundamental habits of karate defense. So for your organization, the mindset shift is similar. Daniel didn't start learning karate with karate, so to speak. there was an important foundation that needed to be built. And your aspiration for a coaching culture may not begin with coaching. Our research suggests that a key fundamental habit and foundational activity that we would encourage you to look at is this asking for feedback and encouraging people to do that. So then how else do you build on this right foundation? And our other critical idea is about introducing a process to follow. We have another poll here to kind of get a sense from the audience. How does your organization, or does your organization currently utilize some kind of conversation model or coaching model? So you can see, the first option, yes, clearly you have one model, it's used across the entire organization, or maybe you have it utilized in some groups in the organization, but not others. The next, you have one, it's floating around, maybe you don't know where it is or who's using it. Or of course, lastly, maybe you don't use a model at all. So have you just weigh in here on kind of how your organization is or is not utilizing some kind of conversation model. So it looks like we have kind of a variety here. But Jack, I mean, from your experience, would you say it's fairly common that people might admit to having a model, but it's a bit ambiguous to how it's being used?
That's very common, and there's obviously a great portion of our participants here on the phone today. The organization doesn't really have a model to follow. So let me jump in and just offer what seems like a counterintuitive observation, and that would be this: there is great freedom that is created in providing structure. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I strongly want to have you kind of think about the fact that when you have a general pattern, a roadmap to follow, you actually free yourself up to focus more attention on the person with whom you're talking, and it does create greater efficiency and greater confidence on the part of both participants when you basically know where you're going. So we're going to propose to you a framework that we have created basically for the practice of coaching, but we want to communicate to you that same general structure applies to the principles that we're talking about here today in terms of managers and frontline employees asking for feedback as well. So the framework that we're going to talk about, and what it does is that it helps you identify what's the specific topic I want to talk with you about. How do we kind of create a conversation that will focus on that topic efficiently, that will emphasize a discovery process rather than a declarative that you know it all kind of attitude. It will kind of define this as being a collaborative process between the two of you, and that you will not be content to just toss out some ideas, but you're going to be hoping that they will follow through with you in terms of the making of the decision and the implementation of that decision. The model we're talking about has the acronym of FUEL, and the F in the acronyms is framing the conversation. U is understanding the current state, and you see it there. E is the exploration process of the discussion, and finally the L is laying out a plan of success. So let's just talk about how we actually apply that. Framing a conversation just simply says we want to make sure we're both in the same conversation. On what topic do I want feedback to occur? Am I looking for positive messages, things that are going well, things that people appreciate? Am I seeking to have observations about what could be done better, differently? Am I wanting particularly to focus on things that aren't happening right now that I think that you may see ought to be happening? So it's really kind of laying out the basic structure and groundwork for the conversation itself. Particularly from my perspective, what is important in this asking process is that you want to be sure to convey that the purpose is not one, it isn't a fishing expedition for compliments, that it really is a discussion around what could you do that would help it to be, your behavior to be even more effective. So how might you do that? You might say, like to get your feedback on, and then whatever that is. Your honest feedback would help me. Here's what I'd like to accomplish. I'd like to get one suggestion for what I could do differently, or what I could start doing that would be helpful. The second phase of the conversation is the understanding phase. And here you might then kind of, your goal is to understand what kind of insights I am most interested in hearing, what you think is going well, what I think is going well, what I want to have from you in terms of correcting my perceptions or my understanding, where would I like you to give me more clarity about what's happening. So what you might say in this part of the conversation is, what did you like about our meeting today? What did you like about the way we rolled out this project over the last couple of weeks? Could you give me some specific examples of things that you think we could have done that we didn't do?
So the next phase is the exploring. And this is really all about, where you want to go, what do you want to achieve, and then also identifying what might get in the way. So some planning ideas, maybe things, that you see here. So what ideas do you already know that you need either start doing or stop doing? What are things that might get in the way of you acting on feedback? Do you tend to be defensive or, as Jack kind of mentioned, fishing for that positive? Is there a barrier in terms of you're asking for something that may be hard to hear? And then what questions would help you stay focused on positive outcomes? So how might you say this? So what would that look like? So things, what could I be doing in the future that would help me be successful, that would help our team be successful? What does a high-performing person do to handle this situation, or how would they act or behave? And then, what approaches have you seen that would be successful or help you be successful? The last part, and often forgotten component of these kind of conversations, is laying out that plan for success. And so feedback and coaching conversations really end up being pointless unless we can create some of that accountability in that plan to help us be successful and implement behavior change. So when you're thinking about this, it's things like you see here. What's the best way that you can demonstrate that commitment to change based on the feedback that you've received? Could this person that you're asking, are they also the right resource to help you act on feedback? Are they going to be the right person to help support you? And then who can you check in with at a later time to see how you've progressed, to see if they've noticed a change and they're noticing success and progress? So then what might that look like? You say something like, based on your feedback, here are the things that I'd like to do. And sometimes that's actually better phrased as an email after you've had some time to think about it and come up with a plan as a good follow-up. It might also look like, what would you add to my plan? It might also look like you've identified a barrier that might get in the way and you're asking someone, can you help me make sure I show up on time to meetings by whatever that might be. And then above all, we would really encourage you at this point to say thank you. Help people feel your appreciation for their willingness to help you make a positive difference in your contribution. So now another poll, and this one is one of those text scrolls, so you're able to enter in a full statement. We'll see people's responses go across the screen. So how do you think a plan will improve feedback? Having the freedom, like Jack mentioned, by having a structure, how do you think that's going to improve feedback for your managers in your organization? So we see some things coming in. This is create more frequency. It'll improve the quality. Someone says remove fear. It will help me to follow up. And someone says encourage me to actually ask. All good things. So thank you for those responses there. Jack, just some of your thoughts before we move on how you think a plan can help improve, it specifically regarding asking to feedback now that we went through the whole model.
Well, I think if you were just to kind of summarize all those comments, you see that there's lots of expressions that it would help improve quantity. And the other big one would be that it does help improve quality, and it uses time more efficiently, and it tends to surface a number of things that just often don't get said. There is something so powerful about someone asking you for feedback, and it elicits information that you would never otherwise receive. You know, I will confess to you that the thing that got me started thinking about this was a conversation that I had with a very respected colleague of mine who had come out to one of our company meetings and made an excellent presentation. And after he was home for a couple of days, I got this phone call from him, and we exchanged pleasantries, and then he said, Jack, I've just got one question I'd like to ask you. And he said, that is, what one thing could I have done that would have made that a better presentation? And it caught me kind of off guard a little bit, but I thought about it, and there was one kind of thought I'd had at the time, and I would never have told him this had he not picked up the phone and called me. And when he thanked me profusely and said, talk to you soon, hung up. And I thought to myself, now I understand why you had such a successful career. That you had the courage, the self-esteem to just pick up the phone and ask. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one that he asked, several people, what could I have done that would have made that a better presentation? So having said that, let's just talk with you about, clearly we were referring to a conversation that you as a supervisor maybe would have planned, and you had arranged to sit down with one of your colleagues, subordinates, and ask them for feedback, and that you initiated this dialogue between the two of you. But that isn't the only way to have it happen. So we'd like to just maybe make a few comments here regarding what we've called fuel on the fly. And the point here is that these general steps can be applied rapidly, more casually, more frequently in lots of conversations that we have in the course of our daily activities. So saying to a colleague, you got a minute? I'd appreciate your thoughts on something I've been thinking about, or something that just happened. So the F part can happen very quickly and very kind of spontaneously. And once you've done that, you can say something like, I'd like to get your perspective on the comments I made during the meeting. Were they helpful? Was I being effective? Did it really contribute? Or what could I have done that would have been even more helpful in our staff meeting? Give me some ideas about what we could have done to make that even a more effective meeting. Give me a couple of ideas, or your thoughts, and then to kind of say something about, I'd really appreciate hearing just your comments over the next couple of 3 weeks when we've met, to see if I've understood and I'm applying what you just got through telling me that I could do differently. So that you're asking them to not make this a one and done discussion, but that you really are wanting to change your behavior, and that you would invite their help in bringing that about. So the point here is that this simple framework for conversations can happen casually, informally, more frequently, and that we just want to emphasize this whole idea that the application of the fuel model it's a framework, not a prison, not a cage. It can be used in performance discussions. It can be used in sort of sitting down with somebody and talking about her development plan. It can be used when you're having a discussion with somebody about his aspirations for the future and kind of helping, kind of dialogue about where this person would like to go in their career. It can be used in discussions with a team when you're talking about how you can better implement a prospective change that you're all collectively engaged in. And clearly it can be used in providing feedback that's reaffirming, that's passing out approbation. We are strong advocates of the value of praise and compliments, but also there's a time for some corrective feedback when you see someone doing something that clearly wasn't as effective, which detracted from their overall performance. So both kinds of feedback. This same model has a very universal applicability.
So if your ultimate goal then is to create a coaching culture, we really commend you. There are so many positive benefits that come from infusing coaching and feedback as key values and behaviors of what you would expect and hold your managers and employees accountable for. And so our overall invitation for today is you consider the foundation that you have that, look at beginning to change this expectation and laying a foundation through asking managers and employees to ask more frequently, more consistently for feedback and to take that initiative to do that. And then this idea of giving them a clear and practical process and structure to help guide those conversations. And that really will increase the quality in their chances for success. Coaching and feedback are areas that we feel are vitally important, especially when it comes to your leadership development strategy. And we've helped hundreds of our clients with these kind of initiatives, no matter where they were in regards to their readiness and laying the foundation. And so whether it was simply building more feedback skills, was it getting more in-depth in coaching skills? Jack even mentioned we have a 360-degree instrument that is specifically designed to measure effectiveness for coaching behaviors. And so all along that spectrum, we have helped provide a lot of value to the clients that we've worked with that wanted to go down this road, that wanted to infuse coaching and feedback as important values in their organization. So if that's you, if coaching and feedback are important initiatives for you and your organization, please connect with us. We'd love to see how a partnership could be very beneficial. So before we close this up, I'm going to now model our topic for the day, and I'm going to ask you for your feedback. This webinar survey that you see at the bottom there is a very important tool for us to know what was useful for you today. And what would you like to see from our webinar series in the future? So I'm asking for your feedback and providing that link there on the screen, the bit.ly/ZFMarch19 would be the one. We're also going to put that hyperlink in the chat so you can click it there. Go ahead and do that. It's very short, just a few questions. And today we're going to give away 10 copies of Joe Folkman's book, The Power of Feedback, as kind of a drawing from those that complete this webinar survey. So let me give you a pre-thank you for your feedback, and it really does help us create more value in these experiences for all of our webinar audience. What have been your key takeaways from today? And so this is one of those, again, it's going to be a text scroll, so you can enter in an entire statement, and we'll see those appear. So thank you for participating. And Jack, we're seeing things like start asking for more feedback. Someone says, I need to know where my managers are. Fuel model is awesome. A coaching culture is possible.
That's the most encouraging one. I think coaching cultures are possible. Maybe if we just flip on its head our earlier assumptions about it being pushed on people rather than pulled. It happens that I drive by a big reservoir where there are lots of boats that are out of water. One of the things that always strikes me is that those that have kind of a permanent rudder, how small that rudder is in comparison to the overall size of the boat. But that rudder manages to steer the boat. And the point here that's being made on this final slide is that the greatest change is often brought about by the small changes in things we do, but we do them very consistently. So even though it sounds like a relatively small change, if we can change pulling and asking in place of expecting managers to always initiate these coaching conversations, I think we'll see some huge differences. So thanks to you all for joining us for today's webinar. And with that, we'll sign off.